So in the last video, we did a comparison between the Instax Mini 40 against the Polaroid Go, and the Instax Mini 40 was the clear winner, mostly because the Polaroid Go film just isn't up to standard. It just couldn't produce the results. In this video, I'm going to be comparing my favorite instant camera, the Instax SQ6, against the Polaroid Now I-Type camera. Now this is their larger format instant camera. It's got a huge film stock in here, and I wanted to see how this compared against my favorite instant camera. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do a comparison. We're going to take a bunch of pictures here in Leeds and see which one is the better of the two. Let's quickly run through some of the key specifications and differences between both of these cameras. So the film size is the biggest difference. The Polaroid instant film might be the largest instant film that's currently available. In fact, it's even larger than the Instax wide. So that might be enough for some of you to pick the Polaroid over the Fujifilm. The Instax SQ6, I mean, the square format film is a good size. It's a comfortable size, but it's not as large as the Polaroid. The downside is the Polaroid is a much larger camera in comparison, so portability does suffer, but then you could argue that you're getting more meaningful shots out of the Polaroid. With the Instax SQ6, you do have a few more settings, so you can switch the flash off, the timer, and you've got all these other settings as well. With the Polaroid, you've only really got two settings, and that is the ability to switch the flash off and using the timer feature, which I'm fine with, because honestly I don't really use a lot of the other settings on the SQ6, and I don't think many people do. I think just being able to switch the flash off is enough. The other big feature in the Polaroid is autofocus. Now, I don't know how good the autofocus is, because honestly with instant film autofocus, I haven't found any major differences. I haven't found it to be a big advantage, especially not in the Polaroid Go. And in the few test shots that I've taken with the Polaroid Now, I haven't seen a major difference, but it's there. So, you know, some of you may value that feature over the SQ6. But let's have a look at the results that each camera can produce. So we're going to be taking a few pictures here in Kirkgate Market with both cameras to see exactly how each of them perform. So in Kirkgate Market, we're taking a few pictures with both cameras, and we're finding that the Instax SQ6 is really struggling in this slightly lower light scenario. A lot of the pictures are coming out quite blurry with this camera. So we're going to go outside and take some pictures with both of these cameras. Hopefully the extra light is going to make it a little bit easier on the SQ6. The Polaroid seems to be faring quite well in these conditions. I haven't found it to be an issue, but then it's taken a lot longer for the Polaroid film to develop. So maybe there are going to be some issues once we finally see the result. But yeah, we're not using the flash because I hate the built-in flash in these cameras. I know some of you might say just switch the flash on, you know, whatever, but I don't like the flash in these. It just washes out everything. So yeah, we're going to go outside, take a few more pictures, and see what this camera is like in brighter conditions. Okay, so we've taken a few pictures with both cameras now, and my first few impressions, I'm leaning a little bit more towards the Polaroid than I am with the SQ6. And the reason for that is because the viewfinder in this is so much better. It doesn't feel cramped. You can look through the viewfinder and just get a clear view of what you're seeing. I mean, the SQ6, despite the fact that this camera seems to have a wider field of view, the viewfinder feels quite claustrophobic, and it's really difficult to frame things correctly. Just a lot easier with the Polaroid. The only thing I don't like about the Polaroid is that the startup time on this is just a little bit slower. I find that the SQ6 is just a little bit quicker to start up, and for me to quickly take a picture, just a little bit easier. Yeah, the Polaroid, just a little bit slower to start up and switch the flash off. Just one of those things. However, what we're going to do now is we're going to start putting both the images from both cameras side by side in Lightroom to see what the results look like, because personally that's really what matters. and I think a lot of you out there will probably value the results more so than the little quirks. So let's take a look at what each camera produces, and then we can make some final conclusions on which one is the best instant camera. So here we have all the images opened up in Lightroom, and the first thing you're going to notice is the difference in color. We've got the Instax on the left, Polaroid on the right. In general, I think the Instax does a better job when it comes to like overall accuracy, and the Polaroid leans quite a bit more into the warmer magenta tones. However, some of you may prefer the look of the Polaroid. Also, in these lower light scenarios, you'll notice there's quite a bit more motion blur in the Polaroid. I've found that the Instax just generally did a slightly better job, but still you'll notice quite a bit of motion blur in the Instax image too. The other thing you'll notice is that the Polaroid has a slightly longer focal length, and this could be beneficial for some of you that want to get closer to your subjects. With the Instax, you can get more in the frame. In this particular shot, the Polaroid struggled with motion blur a little bit more than the Instax did. However, the thing that I struggled with quite a bit with the Instax was framing the shot correctly. I found that the viewfinder on the Instax camera is just a little bit difficult to look through in comparison to the Polaroid, and framing the shot was always a little bit trickier in comparison to the Polaroid. As soon as we went outside and started shooting in the brighter conditions, then we were able to get more shots with less motion blur, although in this particular shot, the Polaroid does seem to have quite a noticeable amount of motion blur as well. I think the major downside to the Instax film is that it is far too contrasty in certain scenarios, because as you can see over here, a lot of the detail in the shadow area is lost, whereas in the Polaroid, you can make out a lot more detail in the shadow areas. Yes, it is a little bit flatter, and maybe a little bit of contrast could help. However, I would rather have some detail in the shadows than no detail like the Instax film does over here. Once again, colors. The Instax is doing a much better job in terms of what the colors are. You know, this is far more accurate in comparison to the Polaroid, but then again, the Polaroid does have quite a nice look to it. We also took some shots in a more controlled environment with continuous lighting and a backdrop, and again, framing the shot with the Polaroid was just a little bit easier. I was able to get the subject more effectively composed. And again, contrast on the Instax is really, really harsh. You can see the highlights are too bright and the shadow areas are a little bit too dark. However, with the Polaroid, it looks far more balanced. Same lighting scenario, exact same conditions, and the Polaroid, I think, did a much better job. Colors, however, the Instax is leaning more towards accuracy. I mean, it's not accurate, but it's closer. However, the Polaroid does look really nice with the way that it's rendering the colors. The final point that I want to make about the Polaroid is that it is a little temperamental, because when you switch the flash on, unfortunately the background becomes really dark and only whatever's directly in the flash is going to be relatively well exposed. Everything else just looks really dark, and I don't like the look of that. However, if the flash is switched off, then you can get really blurry images because a lot of motion blur is introduced into the image. However, when you put that next to the Instax, even without the flash on, yes, it's a little bit blurry, but it does a much better job in the same environment. So flash is switched off. Yes, it's a little bit contrasty, but it's got a good balance with everything. And I think that the Instax is just a more reliable camera when it comes to producing results. So there you have it. That's how the Instax SQ6 compares against the Polaroid Now, and honestly, both cameras are brilliant. These are two of the best instant cameras currently on the market, and you really can't go wrong with either or. There are advantages and disadvantages on both sides, but both of them are fantastic. Having said that, I am personally leaning a little bit more towards the Polaroid camera at the moment, and there are a couple of reasons. The first thing is that I'm kind of now disliking the contrast of the Instax film, and that's not because the contrast in the Instax film is bad. It's just that looking at what the Polaroid is producing, I prefer the flatter tone or the flatter look of the Polaroid film. Some of you may prefer the contrast in the Instax, but that's entirely down to you and what you think is better. So it is based on preference, and I'm leaning a little bit more towards the Polaroid. And the second thing is that the film size. So yes, the film from the Polaroid is quite a bit more expensive, but I think that it might be worth it because the size of the film is significantly larger than the Instax SQ6. This is not to say that the SQ6 is producing small film and it's not, worth it. No, this is not at all the case. The size of the film from the Instax SQ6 is brilliant, but I'm just leaning a little bit more towards the Polaroid. I would have preferred if the film from the Polaroid just developed faster, because it's so ridiculously slow. It is excruciating waiting. I can't talk anymore. It is excruciating waiting for the Polaroid film to develop, and the Instax film is just so much faster. It makes a difference, because when you're with people and you've taken a picture, you just have to wait, and it takes forever. And even after like 10 minutes, the film from the Polaroid hasn't really fully developed, because I found that it can take up to like a couple of hours, and then it's like fully developed. So not a fan of how long it takes for the Polaroid film to develop. I think that maybe, hopefully, eventually they'll kind of fix the recipe a little and maybe get the chemicals right. But right now, it's really slow. Yeah, it's just one of those things. Also, the autofocus in the Polaroid Now, I haven't found it to offer any benefit. So I don't know if that's really doing anything. I'm sure that it's moving the elements a little bit, but honestly, I haven't found it to offer any advantage over the SQ6. So there isn't much in it between these two cameras. And I think that's the main takeaway. Both cameras are utterly brilliant, and I recommend them both. So whatever you think is going to be best for you, I think in this video, I'm just going to be presenting some of the details and some of the differences, and then hopefully it's going to help you decide on which one is going to be best for you. Anyway, just want to say thank you so much for watching our video. If you like this video, hit the like button, please subscribe, share this video, and I hope to see you all in the next one. Thank you.